plugin had me doing something that I rarely ever do. Usually when I come to an instrument, I will find a preset that I like and then tweak from there until I get the sound that I want to. However, with this one, it made me want to get straight in there and create my own presets. So Output sent me over one of their latest contact instruments, Signal, and honestly, it is absolutely brilliant. The whole concept behind it, I got behind straight away as soon as I started playing around with it. It's kind of hard to describe because it's got so many features in there, but essentially it's an instrument that is split into two different halves, and you can load different layers into different halves and kind of blend them together to create a new instrument. Each half can have a different organic instrument or maybe a synthesizer layer, and you can blend them together to create these amazing sounds. On top of that, you can then add different rhythms and different patterns and also a whole load of different effects to create these amazing complex layered instruments. It is kind of hard to describe, but the best way I can do it is kind of show you how it all works. And I'm not going to go through every feature because there's just so many. I'm just going to go through the things that really kind of stand out to me and the way that I would use it. So for example, I've got a basic patch here, the first patch within here. That's just a single note. Let's try a chord. You can hear it's just such a complex sound. Let's try another preset. I am literally holding one key down there. I'm using the chord device here to play a chord, but all that kind of rhythm is coming from within this instrument. It's all set up within these kind of pulse engines either side. I'm going to try one more preset and then I'm going to show you how all this kind of works. It's just such a complex sound. There's so much going on within there that it's very hard to explain exactly what it's doing without going back to scratch, actually starting from an init preset, getting rid of everything, and I can kind of hopefully show how all this works. Also, before I forget, if you want to get hold of Signal, I'll put a link underneath this video to get hold of it. Output have said that they are doing a sale really soon. In fact, I think when this video goes live, they have a sale on. So if you click on the link below, you'll get that sale price as well. So let's jump into the browser. I'm going to go to the Init Patch, and it sounds a bit like this. Even the Init Patch has some kind of movement going. I'm actually going to turn this pulse engine off for now, and I'll show you how that works in a bit. So on the left-hand side here, we have an analog saw. So just a basic analog saw wave type. Now I can actually change this instrument out for something else. Now I've got two different tabs here. I have Synths and Instruments. Under the Synths, we have a whole load of different waveforms we can use. And then under Instruments, we have a whole load of sampled real instruments. So for example, I could load that electronic piano in there. That's on the left-hand side of the instrument, but I can also add a right-hand side as well. So another layer within here. At the moment, it's an analog saw. And I can just adjust the volume of that to balance it out. And again, I can choose whichever instrument I want for this. So I now have two layers within there. I can also tune one of them down, for example, if I want this pad to be a bit lower. I can also then click the Advanced button and go in and tweak each one of these different layers. For example, I could put a filter in on this polysynth. So I've already got a really nice sound going on there already. I've got this electronic piano with a kind of synth pad underneath it. That cutoff really makes it a lot warmer, kind of makes it sit nicely underneath that piano. And it's already a really nice patch, but there's so much more within here that we can do to transform these sounds. We have these pulse engines. So this is the kind of big selling factor of Signal. The pulse engines are basically different kinds of rhythms. Now there's 4 different types of pulse engines. You have waves, which are a little bit like an LFO, I guess. And then you have a step sequencer, an ARP, and a loop. They've all got really different kind of features, and I'm not going to go into every one of them, but they are amazing at being able to modulate the sound and make it sound more interesting. For example, just with this wave type of pulse, there's so many different settings. For example, we can adjust the speed. Can also adjust the shape of it as well. And not only that, you can actually have a second rhythm in there as well, a completely different rhythm that kind of layers on top of that. And you can do this to both sides. For example, say if I wanted to keep that piano quite clean, I could then put a rhythm in on that pad sound. And if maybe that's a bit too much movement, you can actually go into the advanced settings and choose how much of that rhythm you want to have. So just a slight bit of movement there. Now, usually I'm not a big fan of inbuilt effects in plugins like this. However, the way this is designed is very, very smart. There's 9 different effects within here, and you can actually assign these effects to the different layers. So for example, I could put a delay just on that piano. And maybe a little bit of lo-fi on that synth. And a bit of reverb on that piano. Not only can you put effects on each individual layer, but there's also a global effect panel as well, where you can add even more effects on top of all those if you want to. There's just so many features to this plugin that you can create an almost infinite number of sounds and effects and textures and everything else like that. However, obviously getting to all these different controls when you want to very quickly, if you want to automate them or tweak them, can be a bit tricky. However, they've added 4 macro sliders at the top here that you can assign to anything within the plugin. All I need to do is go to this little button at the top here, and I can assign any of these macro sliders to anything within the plugin. So for example, this first slider, let's assign it to the effects. Let's go into the delay. I'm going to assign this to the wet of delay on pulse A. And I can quite easily just tweak the range right here. So maybe from about 20%. So I can do it from quite dry up to about 50%. And you can assign 6 controls up to any one of those macros. So you can create one macro that can do a whole load of different things. For example, I'm going to assign this first macro again to maybe the cutoff on pulse engine B. So now just by turning that macro, I can now adjust both the delay and the cutoff of pulse 2. And then going back to the main interface, I can now just use that slider when I want to. Honestly, I'm just scratching the surface with some of the features within this plugin. There's just so much in there, so many possibilities, almost infinite number of different sounds that you can make from this plugin. So I'm just going to play around with it a bit longer and see if I can come up with some different sounds, maybe make a beat out of it or something. That's a really nice pad sound. This is what I mean by kind of getting in there and kind of making your own presets, because that I could actually just save as a preset for myself. It just sounds really nice. I'm going to call that warm piano pad. Now I think I'm going to make a bass to go with that. I've already got the notes within here and I have signal ready to go. So that's just the Init patch. I'm going to get rid of the rhythm on this because I want to just use the notes that I've got. Let's see about getting a sub in there. A nice deep sub within there. I'm also going to layer that up with something else, maybe a square or something. That works quite nicely. I might take that down a little bit. You can solo it as well, just so you can kind of hear what each individual sounds like. I'm going to take some of that bottom end out because I've already got the sub that's going on within there. I'm going to use the filter to do that. I'll do a high pass filter. See how that sounds together? Now, because I have the sub and that kind of pluck split, I think what I can do is put a bit of reverb on just the pluck. Because it's just that top end, I'm not putting sub through the reverb, which is really cool. So let's find the reverb and I'm going to assign it to pulse B. See, I've got a little bit of reverb happening there, but it's only on the top end of that bass. I can only do that because obviously I have the bass split into two different elements, which is brilliant. It's really cool. Now, of course, you can replicate this by having two different instruments, one with a low bass, one with a high bass, and doing it that way. But it's kind of nice doing it all within the one instrument. And that's where this plugin really kind of differs for me. Usually when I come to a plugin, I will go through all the presets until I find a sound that's similar to something in my head, and then I'll tweak from there until I get the sound that I want to. However, with this one, starting from scratch is almost better than going through the presets. Not to say the presets aren't great, but starting from scratch, you can really find the sound that you want to quite quickly. For example, say you're looking for a plucky kind of bass, you might start with a subby kind of layer and then layer in maybe a marimba or an upright guitar, or maybe that pluck bass sound that I found within here to create that kind of plucky bass. It's a really kind of simple sound source that you can then chuck through all the different effects and all the different pulses within the plugin to create a really interesting sound. And I think that's where it really shines for me. It's this kind of plugin that allows you to really kind of easily play around and experiment with different sounds, but in an easy way. You can look at all those different sources and find something that's familiar to you. I know what a marimba sounds like. I know what an upright guitar sounds like. I know what a cello sounds like. And I can use those sources, I can blend them together to create a really interesting, unique sound quite quickly, and to be fair, really easily within this plugin. It's a very impressive plugin and something I can definitely see myself using going forward. Right now, I'm gonna bring it back.